Hi everyone, and thank you for being here today with us. Sorry about the little technical difficulties. So today we are going to talk about LGBTQI plus rights in Poland. I'm sure that you've been closely following what has been happening in Poland. For example, the declarations of Polish authorities saying that some parts of Poland are LGBT plus free zones, the consideration there of outright banning on LGBT plus pride marches all over Poland, etc. So we were wondering what future awaits in Poland for LGBTQI plus people. Our three guests will bring a lot of insight on the subject. Thank you so much for being here again. So first of all, I'm going to introduce you, Terry. You are a member of the parliament. Thank you so much for being here with us. So you are the co-president of the LGBTI intergroup and the shadow reporter on the Article 7 procedure against Poland on the Green political group. Firstly, thank you for your commitment, and actually it's really important. And you will bring us a lot of insight from what you've been doing, what has been and what can be done by the European Parliament. Then at 4:45, Terry will leave us because you're really busy, and that's normal. And we'll talk with Ania and Michal. Thank you both for being here with us today. So you are both Polish LGBTQI plus students. You will be able to tell us what exactly has been going on in Poland right now, how Polish people feel about these new restrictions, and how the LGBTI plus community reacted. I'm going to introduce myself now. I have been president of the CAELIF for 2 years. The CAELIF is the biggest LGBTQI plus inter-association of France. As a federation, we group more than 20 LGBT plus student associations. This year, we decided on a partnership with the Young European Federalists of Paris to talk about LGBTQI plus rights in Europe, which like of course are a subject that is more relevant than ever. So this conference is the first event of a 1-year cycle about LGBTQI plus people in European countries. Now I'm giving the floor to Nadège, who will present her association, the Young European Federalists of Paris, and who will be the moderator of this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ophélie. So I'm Nadège, president of the Young European Federalists of Paris. We're part of a big team, I would say, and a lot of young European Federalists are present in each country in Europe. And so we're very glad to have you here. I'm not going to speak more about myself because what we really want to know is about you and what you have to say. Terry, I'm going to start with asking you a very large question to introduce the topic. It's what is the situation for the LGBTQI community in Poland right now, and how are you informed of what's happening? If you can give us information on that.
Sure, thanks a lot. And maybe I can just say to start with, I'm an LGBTI activist, but I'm also a member of the Young European Federalists. So this is really bringing together two of my passions, I would say. And thank you so much for organizing this event. I think it's really great and important to look at the situation in Poland. And I'm sure that really the info from the ground, Ania and Michal can give you a much better information about what is happening. But what we are trying to do with the intergroup, and maybe just to say it's a cross-cutting political group of members of the European Parliament that are working on LGBTI issues. We are trying to be in very close contact with civil society organizations working on LGBTI rights and activists because we have seen a very systematic deterioration of LGBTI rights in Poland over the past years. And I think that it has to be said that obviously this is not an isolated case. It's not only happening in Poland, but I would say in the intensity and in the aggressiveness, in which it is happening in Poland, pushed by the Polish governmental party, it is probably, the most negative case I would give this assessment. And one of the things that we are following very closely is obviously the development with these LGBTI ideology-free zones. We have had in the last year, in the end of last year, a resolution in the European Parliament on this topic where we very clearly condemned it. And we are asking the European Commission to actually start infringement procedures against Poland on the basis of these LGBTI ideology-free zones, because as you know, as a European Union, we have fundamental values like rule of law, fundamental rights, and also we have anti-discrimination legislation, and that obviously also includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And that's why we hope to see more action by the Commission, but also honestly by the other governments inside of the European Union to stand up to the situation, because the reports that we are getting from Poland are really, really worrying. And this is not something new, but already for years.
Of course, yeah. And so are you in contact with local associations in Poland and that fight for the rights of the LGBT community?
Yes, we are. With the intergroup, we are trying, as I said, to work as closely as possible with the activists, obviously on the national level, but also recently, especially with people coming from the regions or the towns, the cities, the areas that have declared themselves to be LGBTI, ideology-free zones. And this year, for example, once a year we give an award for freedom of thought and achievements in terms of fighting for freedom and democracy. This is called the Sakharov Prize as a European Parliament. And as Intergroup this year, we have actually nominated people who have outlined what is happening in the LGBTI ideology-free zones, the activists standing behind the so-called Atlas of Hate, that have done a lot of research work about where these zones are being declared, and we are obviously trying to follow their work very closely to know what is happening on the ground, but also to know what activists and the LGBTI community in Poland would like to see from us, what they want us to do to support them in their struggle for fundamental rights.
Of course. Of course, yeah. So our second question would be about what are your thoughts on the new strategy that was announced a few weeks ago from the Commission to fight against discriminations? And what do you think about what was said?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, what I have been describing, and I think what also you are probably going to hear from Ania and Michal later, the situation in Poland is very worrying, but as I said, it is not only happening in Poland. So we see a sort of backlash, an authoritarian backlash against LGBTI rights of minorities, women's rights. You could also say a lot of things there in the context of Poland. And this is why it's so important that the European Commission, with this strategy, it's the first of its kind, and very clearly shows the support also for the LGBTI community across the European Union. And it's a very, comprehensive, I would say, set of different measures, not only legislative measures, but also non-legislative measures, things that we want the External Action Service to do, things that we want to do ourselves also inside of the European institutions, for example. But maybe I would highlight two proposals which I believe are very positive inside of this strategy. The first one is something that I myself might profit from at some point. I'm in a relationship with a French citizen, and if my girlfriend and I got married here in Belgium, but then, for example, we moved to Poland or Romania, probably our marriage would not be recognized there, and this is obviously a restriction on our LGBTI citizens fundamental rights to freedom of movement inside of the European Union. And this is why the European Commission is planning to make a proposal, or at least explore the possibilities of making a proposal on mutual recognition of documents, like, for example, birth certificates, adoption documents, but also hopefully, we hope they're going to add this, also marriage documents, so that we wouldn't be restricted in the legal clarity that we have when we move to other EU countries. That's number one. I think this would be a great step forward to have more safeguards in this respect for EU citizens. And the second thing, and that's a little bit more tricky to probably put into reality, that would be adding hate crimes to the list of so-called EU crimes, also on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is so important, especially for countries like Poland, where there is no specific legislation on hate crimes, for example, and where we have seen, you know, with this anti-LGBTI rhetoric over the past month and years, the numbers have really increased, and a lot of people coming from the community, Ania and Michal will be able to explain this much better, are scared to face hate speech, hate crime, on the basis of their sexual identity, sexual orientation or gender identity. And this is why having something like this coming from the European level that would then have to be implemented on the member state level would be such a great step. But I have to maybe add one note there. It would need unanimity in council to actually do that. And you can imagine that the Polish government, also the Hungarian government, are maybe not so fond of actually adding this to the list of EU crimes. So I think this will be a big political struggle for us. But it's good that this proposal is put forward by the Commission.
Of course, yeah. And to talk a bit more about the problems, the issues about the Polish government and the Hungarian government, do you think unanimity would be is attainable? I mean, is it would it be able to happen, or are you a bit skeptical?
Well, you're probably following a little bit what is happening with regards to the budget. We are actually in the end of the negotiations for the multi-annual financial framework and the recovery plan. As you know, the European Union wants to invest hundreds of billions of euros in order to get out of this crisis. But we want to have a safeguard for rule of law for the budget, which I also co-negotiated, this rule of law conditionality. And now the Hungarian and Polish government have said that because for the MFF and the recovery plan, we would need unanimity, and they are going to put their veto forward if we have this conditionality put in place. Whereas for the conditionality, we would only need a qualified majority voting, so this could go through, but then they're basically blackmailing the rest of the European Union so that we are not moving forward. And I think this can give you a little bit of a feel where we are at right now, that the level of escalation of this conflict is really at the maximum, I would say, that there is really an open threat coming from governments from Poland and Hungary, even though, and I can only repeat this again and again, this is really directly also going against the interests of Hungarian and Polish citizens, because Hungary and Poland are two of the countries that, rightly so, but that really strongly benefit from EU funding. And now the Polish and Hungarian government are basically cutting their own access to funding to support of, I don't know, programs against climate change, social equality, democracy, support for NGOs, and so on, just to make a point on this conditionality question. So I think that it will be a heavy lift to get something with unanimity across the line in the field of LGBTI rights.
Okay, I understand, yeah. And so could you tell us a bit more about what was your role as a reporter on the procedure against Poland involving the Article 7?
As was rightly indicated in the beginning, I'm the shadow for the Article 7 procedure against Poland for the Green Group. And this was well, maybe due to the fact that, I mean, it's not necessary to be Polish to do that from the side of the European Parliament, but up until recently, we did not have, unfortunately, any Polish members inside of our group. Now we have one, Sylwia Spurek, who is also a fighter for LGBTI rights and feminist rights. And that basically means that you are part of the group of MEPs that are following the situation closely when it comes to the breaches of rule of law, democracy, and fundamental rights. And maybe to give you a little bit more of a context, the Article 7 procedure against Poland was started by the European Commission, and it has a very, I would say, limited mandate because it mostly looks at questions of the independence of the judiciary that are obviously very closely linked also to fundamental rights. We could see that recently where the Constitutional Tribunal, which is not actually legitimately set up anymore, basically declared, well, de facto a ban on abortion in Poland. So you could see that there are very close links. But this procedure against Poland was initially only supposed to look at the independence of the judiciary. As the European Parliament, and you can see this in the reports that we have adopted, we have broadened the scope, and we have also very clearly said that we want to have fundamental rights being covered in this as well. And there has always also been a very strong focus on LGBTI rights. And there obviously my role as the co-president of the intergroup, and then following the situation in Poland closely, really played together very well. And if you are interested in the findings that we have made, we have just in October adopted the interim report again, where basically we list all the things that are happening in Poland right now that are problematic with regards to rule of law, fundamental rights, and democracy.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question, more about your action as a member of the international, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex association. So what do you do in that organization, and what can be done?
I don't really do that much in that organization, but more with that organization, because it's the umbrella organization for LGBTI organizations from all across Europe. So there are also Polish organizations represented in LGBTQ-Europe, actually Europe and Central Asia. So they have put these two regions together, and they are obviously doing very important work for us. And I can only say here, I mean, as a parliament, obviously we have some legal tools, we have some parliamentary things that we can do. We can set up debates, we can make laws that follow the needs of the LGBTI community. But in my time as a parliamentarian, I have just learned that if there is no pressure from civil society and organizations, it's very, very difficult just from the parliamentary side to push something through, because then the pressure is not high enough. And I think organizations such as ILGA have really made it possible that the questions of LGBTI rights are much higher on the agenda right now. For example, the strategy, I think we couldn't have had without all the organizations that are working on the ground, also like yourselves, that are pushing for this. So I can only say that, I mean, we are obviously working on parliamentary issues, but for us also the very close cooperation with civil society organization is a major pillar of our work as the intergroup.
Of course, yeah. Another question would be your thoughts about the fact that a few months back the Commission decided to cut the financial help it provided to certain cities in Poland, and that were discriminating openly LGBT people. Was this decision efficient? Do you think it's the right method to apply? What do you think?
This was done by the Commissioner for Equality, Helena Dalli, and I can only tell that she has really been, she has pushed a lot for making LGBTI rights much more prominent in the European debates. In the last legislature, it's already my second legislature, I'm a little bit of a granny in the European Parliament already. We did not have a commissioner that was specifically responsible for these topics, and it has really been a change now that we have somebody who is really also championing LGBTI rights now with the strategy, but also with what she did over the summer, where she basically withheld funding to communities very specifically that had declared themselves LGBTI ideology free. So it was not just randomly because they're from Poland, but really specifically because of political and discriminatory actions that they had done. And then, I mean, well, a little bit ironically or absurdly, the Polish government basically jumped in and gave them triple the amount of money that they would have gotten from EU funding. So I think there you can also get a little bit of an atmospheric insight about how escalated this whole conflict already is. And as a European Parliament intergroup, we welcomed this step. I think it's always a little bit of a tricky situation because on the one hand, we want to very clearly show that, you know, this fundamental rights is absolutely foundational and fundamental to work on a European level. And we have to defend fundamental rights as much as possible. But on the other hand, I mean, these funds are sometimes used also to maybe have exchange programs between different communities. And from what I hear, for example, from the local councillors in my own hometown, Gelsenkirchen, it's a partner city with Olsztyn in the northeast of Poland. And they are saying that obviously you can also use these kind of exchange programs in order to, you know, maybe build bridges and make people in associations also, you know, LGBTI associations to bring people from the community and to make them understand why it's so important to fight for LGBTI rights. So I would say, yes, we have to put the conditionality, but at the same time, we still have to make it possible really for the citizens, the organizations, the civil society to work together, because I think this is also one of the founding ideas of the European Union, that we, you know, listen to each other, get together and build these bridges. So I hope that there will be a way around doing things like this again. But if it's needed in order to defend fundamental rights, then we are also willing to do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much for answering our questions. I can see that some questions appear in the chat box. Maybe, Ophélie, you were the first one to ask a question. We're in a small group, and I mean, it's 4:25, so maybe you could ask the question out loud and interact directly.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a question. So do you think the procedures or actions against Poland should be undertaken by both the LGBTQI plus and feminist groups, or women rights defense and LGBTQI plus rights defense are two subjects that must be treated separately at the European level? Thank you.
I think I can be very quick. I think they're very closely linked. I mean, I also work a lot on feminist issues and women's rights. So I would say that we are stronger together, and for the communities to work together and the organizations as well. So we have always said that we are going to work together. And I think that also in the case of Poland, you can see that the feminist mobilization and the LGBTI mobilization, they're also working together very closely.
Maybe, Leo, you were the second one to ask a question. You could ask it directly in oral.
Of course. So, I just had one simple question. What are the most active political groups in the European Parliament that are defending those rights? And are they European People parties, deputies that are involved in those fights? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Leo, for the question. I just have to say that today I have the feeling I'm cursed when it comes to technical issues, because I just lost my calendar from my phone as well. So maybe it's me, you know, that is making things difficult. I apologize to everyone. No, I mean, if you ask me, obviously the Green Group in the European Parliament is the most active political group. No, but joke aside, I mean, if you look at the numbers, we are very much engaged. We have a lot of members in the intergroup, but also obviously the socialists, the liberals, and the left group in the European Parliament, which are maybe a little bit what you would have expected now for me to say. But what we are trying to do also is to expand a little bit more to the pro-European conservative group, the EPP. We have a very active member and co-chair, a vice chair from Ireland, Maria Walsh, who is a conservative member, comes from a very Catholic background, and one of her main issues is to fight for LGBTI rights. So we are really trying to be, as an intergroup, cross-political affiliations, because we believe that defending LGBTI rights should actually be something that no matter what what you agree with politically, and you should fight for. But obviously, I mean, I'm not telling you anything surprising. There are traditionally, I would say, more people engaged in the struggle on the left side of the parliament than on the right side of the parliament. We don't take members from fascist groups, and obviously the ECR group, which is the anti-European national right-wing conservatives, where also the the Peace Party, which is in the Polish government, is in. There are very few people who support LGBTI rights. And if you are more interested, I think maybe later I can post the website of the intergroup in the chat. We have just recently, I think symbolically, but also for us, reached a very important goal that now we have open members from all member states of the European Union. This is obviously something that we have been striving for a long period of time, because we want to be represented in all of the European member states so that we can really fight for enhancing LGBTI rights also all across the European Union.
Thank you for your answer. I think Margarita was the third one to ask a question. Maybe if you want to ask it directly.
Yeah, of course. So my question was that we've been hearing some criticism coming from many different public figures about the fact that rule of law is no proper and written definition concept. So there's no proper or written definition about the rule of law. And I wanted to know how would you react to this kind of statement, Terry? Thank you.
I know I have to listen and argue with that very often. I mean, it's an argument that is completely instrumentalized because over the past years, with what was happening in Hungary first and then in Poland, and the European Commission, together with other also international actors, has really been trying to establish a sort of culture of rule of law, fundamental rights, and democracy all across the European institutions. So we have had a lot of debates, for example, with the Venice Commission from the Council of Europe, that already for a long time is drafting reports and assessments around the state of rule of law in different countries, not only in EU member states. And there you can very clearly say that they have worked out, and also with an international set of other institutions, a pretty clear sort of guideline and checklist about what you need in order to have a functioning democracy. And one of the things that, for example, is very often named very high on the list is the independence of the judiciary, so that there is no political control over who is appointed to, for example, be constitutional judge, because we see right now in Poland that what the Polish government is really systematically doing, like, for example, with this abortion law. I've been following this for a long time, and this was a proposal that has already gone through the Polish parliament several times. But instead of then having a legislative decision by the parliament, because there is probably going to be a lot of political opposition to this, what they have done now is taken control over the tribunal, the constitutional tribunal, and then declared the existing abortion law unconstitutional, and through that obviously impeded on fundamental rights of their own citizens, without even having to take the political decision in the parliament. So I think it very clearly shows that in cases such as Poland, this argument is coming, but it's mostly coming in order to not having to answer maybe difficult questions for the functioning of the independence of the judiciary, but also the separation of powers. And if I may add one thing, because this is an argument that is very often used also against the conditionality mechanism, and I was co-negotiating this, and I can tell you, I mean, the legal base of this, it's absolutely clear, and it's explicitly mentioned in the treaties. So I really think that, you know, if people were so worried about that there is no agreement of what rule of law means, maybe they should have thought about it when they signed the treaties, because this concept is very clearly established inside of the treaties of the functioning of the European Union, not only on a side note, but really as one of the crucial pillars of the functioning of the European Union.
I saw that, Ania, you had also a question. Maybe you want to ask it?
Yes, true. So my question for you, Terry, is because as a Polish citizen, I can see maybe the situation a bit differently, because it has impact on me as a citizen, but I'm not just a citizen of Poland, but also European citizen. So I would like my rights to be protected as well, especially by the European Union. Like right now, if I see that it's not well done on a national level. So for this budget conversations, I would ask if Poland loses the funding, what we can do and what are the opportunities for individual organizations and separate, maybe even individual persons, to apply for these funds directly, because I've heard that there are some possibilities like that, but I don't know about the current level of the debate in this matter.
No, I think what you are asking is absolutely important, and we have obviously been thinking about this a lot, because in the end, if you are cutting EU funding, this will also mean that a lot of the funding that actually goes to organizations that do very valuable work, human rights defenders, might also be cut. So what we have established in the budget for the next funding period is to have a program, the Rights and Values program, where, for example, organizations, civil society actors can directly and not through a national interlocutor in Poland apply for EU funding. Because, and you know this much better than I can, a lot of civil rights, democracy organizations have actually also lost the financial support on a Polish level. So then we want to introduce this new tool in order to counterbalance maybe the restricted access that organizations have on a national level. And then always the debate was, because traditionally, and I have done this myself, applying for EU funding is a really big bureaucratic burden. Nadège is also nodding. We all know it. You know, you have to fill in these million forms, and then you have all these indicators and so on and so on. So what we want to do is to have, especially for smaller organizations, an easier way to access these funds. We have very positive experiences, for example, with funding from the EEA countries, so Norway and Switzerland and others, where the access to the funding is much easier. Also, the Council of Europe has some funds that are much easier to access, but to basically achieve the goal that I think we all want, that if there is this financial conditionality ever to be activated, that the organizations on the ground would actually still be able to have access to the funding. But this is also, maybe just to say, this is safeguarded in a way in the proposal that we have negotiated on the conditionality as well. So we have these safeguards for the final beneficiaries on the ground.
Okay, great. And well, if there are other questions, I invite you to write them in the chat box. Next question is coming from Michal, if you want to ask it.
Hello, I have a question. How could the European Union help Poland with the illegitimate constitutional tribunal and Supreme Court when the current ruling party loses parliamentary majority? Let's imagine such a situation in the future. is there any way that the European Union could assist the new power in Poland, for example? Because right now it doesn't seem possible to undo the damage with the Constitutional Tribunal and Supreme Court, which are illegal, actually appointed with violation of the Polish Constitution. Is there any action the European Union could take to help Poland?
This is a very tricky question, because what you are referring to obviously shows how much the current government has already created damage that is not easily going to be taken back, because I mean there is now already a constitutional tribunal in quotation marks in place that are producing rulings that are illegitimate, and also other courts, these disciplinary chambers, they're basically polluting the justice system in Poland with rulings that are illegitimate, and to undo this damage, it's not going to be just, and I mean, I don't want to be negative or pessimistic, but you cannot just have a change in the government and then everything is going to be fine again. But you have to then see how you can basically create a system that is again based on separation of powers, where you have an independent judiciary and where you safeguard fundamental rights. And I mean, taking back legislation that is discriminatory and going against fundamental rights is going to be much easier than, again, having a justice system that you can actually agree on. So I think, I would hope that with the court cases we already have, you're probably following the infringement procedures that are already existing now, where we also already have ECJ rulings, that on the basis of this, very closely following the usual procedures of the European Court of Justice and implementing these rulings, that with that this could help then to undo some of these problems. But I think for me, it's it wouldn't be fair to say it would go like this, snap, and then the problem would be solved. I think it will be a longer process. And maybe also just to add, what we are seeing in Poland, you probably know much better than I do, the society also with this divisive language, with what the government has really been trying to do, has been very much polarized over the past years. So it's not just, that then you would have another government and all these problems. You see this in the US right now, Joe Biden is going to be president of a country that is heavily divided, and it's going to be exactly the same in Poland, even if there is a change in government. So I think there will be much more effort put into working with that as well, so that you can heal these wounds at some point and then try to look into the future together, and building not only in Poland, but in the whole of the European Union, a more constructive dialogue again.
Okay, and then, well, it's time to ask the last question. It's coming from Simon, if you want to ask it for yourself.
Yes, I know that you are working for LGBTQI plus rights in Poland, but do you think that European institutions have powerful enough weapons against, well, not weapons, but means against the Polish government to force them to change their stance on LGBTQI rights, as many of the most powerful tools the Union have are blocked by the Hungarian government?
No, I think what you are referring to, it's true, and especially the Article 7 procedure, we have talked about it, but we know that as long as we have two cases, Hungary and Poland, they're always going to basically protect each other in council, because in order to finalize the Article 7 procedure, which would mean the loss of voting rights inside of the council for the respective member state, and you would need unanimity from all the other member states, and when it's on Hungary, Poland is going to veto, and when it's on Poland, Hungary is going to veto. So you are right in this, but I still, if you really look at the treaties and if you really look at the setup of the European Union, it's obviously not perfect. It's not federalist. The European Union doesn't have as much executive powers as maybe in some fields it should have. but we do have tools. And I think the infringement procedures that have been put forward, for example, with regards to the so-called justice reform that the PiS government has put in place, have also shown this. And we in the European Parliament are convinced that when it comes to LGBTI ideology-free zones, we could already act now because we have anti-discrimination legislation, like, for example, the Employment Equality Act. These municipalities that are declaring themselves to be LGBTI ideology-free, they are also employers. And we actually have a law on European level to say that employers cannot discriminate against people on the basis of their sexual orientation. So we could bring this in front of the ECJ and tell them, look, check, is this not discrimination, what is happening in Poland? So I think if we are a little bit creative and thinking about what we already have in terms of European legislation, we could do much more. And one last point, I think that the Commission has been very reluctant and reserved on acting against Poland over the past month, especially because they were kind of anticipating that Poland would veto the budget and that we would need unanimity in Council in the end. This is why they haven't been doing anything. And I can only tell you, well, look, you haven't been doing a lot, but still Poland is now going to try to block the MFF. So I think this strategy obviously didn't work. So we need to have a much stronger strategy where the Commission, with infringement procedures, with different tools, can stand up to the Hungarian and Polish government. And one last point, and you are probably already following this, I mean, now with regard to this blocking of the budget, today or yesterday it came out that the Commission is working on having other means or other possibilities to actually get the recovery fund across the line that would not need unanimity. So also there we have possibilities on the European level. And I hope that the European Commission is going to stand stronger, that they're not going to cave in to this blackmailing strategy, and it's to be seen. I mean, the UCO is next week. Yeah, stay posted on this. It's definitely going to be a very exciting week for European citizens to watch.
Thank you very much. Well, it's 4:45 and we're on time, I would say. Maybe last thing we could ask of you is, do you have an advice or something you want to share with us? Anything, but before you have to leave.
I mean, I can only say keep going. I think it's already great that you are working so much on these topics. As a member of the LGBTI community, I can only say that I think we are a community that works across borders. So when LGBTI rights are attacked in Poland, this also concerns me and you. And I think that this is the solidarity that we have seen over the past months and years. Is really, if I want to use this word, weapon is our strongest weapon. Because with this, raising awareness around it, making noise around it, we can really change the whole story, how everything is going to end. And I think that maybe ending on a more positive note, the progress we have seen for our community over the past decades, you know, if I look back 30, 40 years ago, how Europe looked like. I think we also have a lot of reason to be hopeful. And yes, we are facing this backlash. I know the situation is dire. I can only applaud again and again the Polish activists that are standing up to this really on the ground. But I think we should also stay optimistic and positive, because we can win this battle in the end if we stand together and if we stand united on this. And if I can end by just really briefly saying, I have to go now because we have a preparation meeting for the Council of the European Green Party that is happening this weekend. It was actually supposed to happen in Warsaw, so I was supposed to travel to Warsaw right now. And we are also going to have a session on LGBTI rights in Poland very, very specifically. So if you are interested, check it out. I can also drop it in the chat after I have left. And then if you want to, you can drop by. Thank you so much for organizing this. It was great fun, really great questions. And now I still wish you a wonderful debate.
Thank you very much, and have a great meeting afterwards. Well, I'm going to give the Ania and Michal the time to speak now. Thank you again, Terry. So, Ania and Michal, if you want to take 2 or 3 minutes to present yourself. Maybe Ania, you can start.
Yes, hello again, everyone. I'm a Polish student, a member of LGBT International, let's say, Society, and a member of JEF Poland. But actually, I've done more with French and German section. Like most of the things that I've done in JEF was actually like international projects, which I like really admire. Maybe they weren't like exactly on this topic, more about the European, like the future of the European Union, but that's very interconnected because it's about the future of EU citizens as a whole. So I feel like it's continuation of our conversations that we've started before about some other topics. Well, I'm trying to engage now in protecting of LGBT plus rights as much as I can now. Like for now, it's just participating in such events like this one. So thank you guys for inviting me, because it's great to know that you are interested, that you do care, because like sometimes we feel isolated here in Poland. I'm traveling, but right now I can't. I have international friends, which helps me like survive and to see the hope for the future and see that the struggle in other countries is similar. So thank you again for organizing this debate. Like right now, I'm a student of College of Europe here in Warsaw, Natolin, and we also have some projects in our minds for the future, like especially in March. I hope it's going to be maybe a better situation. We can maybe invite some of the guest speakers for conferences. We are planning to organize 1 week of events like preparation, and then in the weekends more like fun events, but also like more about like informing maybe allies or informing other people what does it mean to be a part of LGBT community. So we are preparing now, and let's hope for the future.
Thank you very much. Michal, if your turn now.
Hello everyone. So I'm Michal SUSZEK. I'm a student of École Nationale des Ponts et Chaussés in France. At the end of my study, I decided to move for my studies to France in the hope of finding a better environment, a more peaceful and accepting environment for my study. Yes, I will tell more about it later. I do some activism. I did some activism in France. I co-founded the first LGBTI plus association at my school, Ponts et Chaussés. I also co-organized the first Pride March in my hometown, a little town in Poland, Koszalin, in 2019. So basically, that's it.
Okay, great. So my first question for you two is what are your reactions about what Terry just said and about the questions that we asked? Did something come to your mind, or what did you think of the exchange that we just had?
So if I may say something, it appears to me it's very heartwarming that Europeans in other EU member states are well informed about what is happening in Poland, and they are concerned, and there are constructive actions, like from Terry, for example. And it's really good to know that other Europeans are very are showing solidarity with us. We are not alone, because, as Ania said, at some points the situation made us feel that we are very isolated and a little bit envious of other LGBT Europeans who are living in more accepting countries. So it's a good sign that that we are not alone.
Great. Maybe Ania, do you want to speak?
Yes, we started some conversations about like many different issues like LGBT free zones or ILGA association reports about Poland. So there are even too many subjects that we can talk about. So you can maybe ask us later about like specific things, because like we are personally, at least me, I'm overwhelmed about the things going on now in Poland past few months, especially, and especially because of the presidential campaign in Poland, where this term of LGBT ideology was used so many times that we could hear this every day in like news, like said by the Polish politicians. So in this matter, I see this backlash in Poland because, well, before maybe this topic was kind of a taboo, that people could live their lives somehow. It wasn't perfect. It was terrible comparing to other countries, especially other countries in the European Union. And right now we can see the evidences of the reports showing that, like this year, like 2019 report of ILGA showing that Poland is in the last position, which is just terrible. So it's not just what we think in generally that we have a worse situation. It's based on the evidences, and it's not about public opinion, but about like actual rights that we do have or we don't actually. So it's about creating your own family or protecting your personal rights, or if you are an object of hate speech or something. So we don't have much rights in this matter. So well, and adding to this, the real hate speech that we can hear right now in the public media, for example, it seems like everyone is against us, at least for some time. Maybe we also see the growing support. There are many marches in Poland. It's getting somehow better and worse at the same time. And as Terry said, it means that we are more polarized, which is not a good thing to like for the future, because we still believe that we can do better for the future. But with this highly polarized society, it's going to be problematic.
Of course, yes. And so you already began to talk a bit about it, but how would you describe today the situation in Poland? You said it was people were polarized around that question of LGBT rights. How maybe do your families live, like your friends, your families, the people you know in Poland live the situation currently, and what what would you have to say about that?
I would say that the struggle is big, especially because we have both things at the same time. This LGBT ideology, like the whole debate, but at the same time we have pandemic. So many of us during summer, during this time that we have this presidential campaign, we were just isolated in our homes. So it means that you are overwhelmed by all the information coming from the news about that, and you're just alone with your head. So especially for like myself, that was problematic because I couldn't see the reality as it is, but I was just overwhelmed by the information that I was getting. And similar was for my other friends, like for other people from the LGBT society, like not society, community. Like it's hard to say because there are just many different people who just are gay or trans. I don't know many trans people, but especially lesbians that I know. During pandemic, we were discussing mostly this. So we were not talking about some random things like about Netflix series or something, but we had to communicate about that because that was a big thing on our minds. So, and we also started this ideas to maybe move somewhere else. Maybe it's a high time to, because we've seen, we've hoped before for some changes, but if the changes are for worse, at least for now, maybe it's high time to move and to have a kind of a normal life. If you can have your family, at least if you can get married or adopt a child, like whatever, if you have any perspective for the future, maybe it's easier if you are 20 few years old and you want to like start your grown-up life. So that's very problematic. I used to think about moving somewhere else before, but some of my friends that normally wanted to stay in Poland then considered maybe going somewhere else. So that's very sad that people who like, especially they live in Warsaw because Warsaw is kind of fine. And they really like living here, but they started considering it.
Okay, so Michel, it's a bit what you were saying, that like you moved to France by choice to be in a safer, more reassuring environment. Can you maybe talk a bit more about that?
So I had huge hopes when leaving Poland for my master's degree, and I picked France. And of course, I imagined unicorns and rainbows. It was not that much unicorns and rainbows. I was like met with some reality, but still much better reality than in Poland. There was no comparison. For example, I realized that there was no LGBT association at my school. So instead of like complaining about it, I established one. I found two other students, two girls, and we started an association in our school in cooperation with CAELIF. So that was like some constructive action to not only help myself, but I realized that there were other LGBT students in my school in situation like mine. They were like moving to France for like a better life from China, for example, and it was a move to like create a platform for discussion within our school, because international students are much more linked to their schools when they are abroad than French students. We mostly like live at school, is the center of our lives there. But I also tried to keep helping Poland at the same time. For example, in distance, by taking frequent flights back to Poland, I helped organize the first Pride March in my hotel. It was the only Pride March because it was the first one in 2019. Then we have the pandemic, and soon we are likely to have a ban on Pride marches in Poland, which is pending. Actually, that project, it's like a citizens project where the signatures under the bill were collected on the streets and in churches. But in my opinion, that that project has very serious constitutional flaws. But it doesn't matter anymore in Poland because the Constitutional Court will approve it anyway. So this is, we cannot really even base on the fact that we have there's no protection for LGBT people in Poland whatsoever. It does not exist in Polish law, but even those constitutional protections for like every people of every kind, like freedom of association or freedom of manifestation, it's likely to get taken away from LGBT people specifically, just because they can. Yes, and honestly, I don't really imagine myself living in Poland. I left Poland some time ago, and I don't plan on settling down in Poland or coming back. Maybe I'll settle down in France. Maybe it will be some other country, but it must be more affirming, provide some protection, provide an opportunity to start a family, like Ania said, because for me, starting a family in Poland is impossible, and it will be impossible for, I think, at least 10 years. It will stay impossible. So it's quite sad, but for people like me and Ania, the only reasonable choice to have a normal life is to move out from Poland. Just stay away. And it is also what I hear from younger people, younger than me, because in Poland recently we saw an increase in grassroots activity, because the polarization is so high, the pressure is so high. So more and more young people, like even in high school, start to act. For example, like 10 years ago, there was no LGBT movement in my hometown. Now we have one, and with lots of members who are really willing to do something. But those people also say that they don't really see future for themselves in Poland. And for most of people in our case, the ultimate goal is to leave Poland and settle down abroad and start a life over there.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the most active people in Poland right now are really seriously considering moving out from the country?
Maybe not the most prominent activists, but I'm saying about those grassroots activists, like those who start their journey with activism and do it like simple volunteers at the associations. I would say those people are, at least when I speak with people from Koszalin, from my hometown, they don't see themselves in Poland.
Okay, yeah, I understand. And so both of you are really, I would say, pessimistic from a French point of view, I mean, but hearing you speak, I think it's more realistic than pessimistic because of all the things you've described. Maybe if Michel, you want to give us like some examples of things that in France you're able to do without asking you any question of will I be well, is this dangerous for me, or if I can post something on social media, and things that you can't do back in Poland, like maybe 3 or 4 examples of things you can do in France?
So, for example, in France, it is a normal thing that you're a student in an engineering school, you're part of the LGBTQ community, and nobody really sees this as something weird or inappropriate, or nobody asks weird questions. Of course, occasionally there might be some like some inappropriate joke, but that's all that ever happened to me in France of bad things, because after all, it's an engineering school. It's like we know what we're talking about. But for example, in France, you can walk on the street in Paris, on the street in hand with a person of the same gender. In Poland, that's extremely risky. Most likely you would get beaten up. That's what would happen in Poland. In France, you can do it. Maybe not in every place of France, but in most places of France, you can do it. That's an example of the difference.
I would maybe add something that I don't see this situation as pessimistic as Michal, maybe, because like living in Warsaw, I can see people holding hands, and we have some places like clubs which are not open now, which is even worse because we can't meet other people. But well, Warsaw is kind of open, and we sometimes have the big monument, like big palace of culture and science in the middle of Warsaw, and sometimes it has a rainbow lightning. So it means that Warsaw has a support for LGBT community. There is a big pride event each year as well, not this year. But there are thousands of people, and this march is very calm and just like a fun event with many people coming in colorful costumes and so on. Like not as colorful as in Berlin maybe or somewhere else, but it's getting better. But there is a difference between Warsaw and other parts of Poland, of course, and it's not just East and West. There is a difference between East and West. I'm from Eastern Poland and from LGBT-free zone, actually. But the most division is between cities and other parts of Poland. So and we have this difference also for the elections and for specific public opinion surveys, that we see that that in the big cities, especially over 500,000 citizens, people are more open, and it's also safer for LGBT community to live there.
And I had a question on what does the Polish government think about the fact that the European Union wants to put in place a lot of measures to guarantee non-discrimination? Do you have information on that, or maybe generally, what does the Polish government think about the EU, and how can it be maybe it's going to sorry, I don't have the word in English, but yeah. So what does the Polish government think about the EU, especially on LGBT questions?
What we can hear, for example, in the government propaganda, in the government-owned television, is saying that that is bad influence, and any protections that the EU is trying to force on Poland are basically an assault to Polish sovereignty, which is nonsense. But it's actually very simple propaganda they are serving, and it is very sad that some people in Poland actually believe it. Right now, they are in a huge clash with the European Union. Nobody really knows what will happen with the EU budget, how they will solve it, because, as Terry said, there is this mechanism for protecting the rule of law coming with the new European Union financial framework. There's a veto on it. We don't know how it will end, but they don't really follow this European spirit of protecting minorities. They are rather looking for an enemy, a scapegoat, which in this case are LGBT people, to focus to make the people focus all their frustration on LGBT people, to channel all the anger towards LGBT people. It's a political strategy, what they're doing.
Yes, following the news in public television sometimes, which is really harmful, but sometimes I try, because the public television is in line with the government's narrative as well. So I would say that there is this narrative which says that Poland is and should be should keep their traditions, and be people should be patriots, and it's very nationalistic point of view, which I don't share actually. So personally, for me, it's not going to in a good direction. So protecting these Polish values, Catholic values, traditional values, it's not doesn't agree with LGBT rights and LGBT protection. So as Michal said, LGBT community is not called community, it's called LGBT ideology or even lobby, and it is called this way, and it is presented as an enemy for the for Polish values, and this is very risky because people can follow the news and feel threatened by this enemy, like something which is strange for them because maybe they don't have any LGBT people in their like surroundings, or they don't know, because people who are afraid of sharing this like personal information, maybe they just don't share, and so it means that other people don't know, which creates this misinformation. I would say that this is there are maybe there are LGBT people somewhere, but there is something else, because LGBT people and LGBT like lobby which exists and wants to like threaten us and to change our culture, to change us, and at the end we are not the same Poland as we are now.
Another example of what is happening in Poland, maybe not with the same intensity right now, are the propaganda bans. So there is a foundation, Pro Right to Live Foundation, that has set up a set of bans with banners that the LGBT lobby wants to promote sexual education at schools in order to groom children for sexual abuse. And we know that obviously the purpose of sexual education is exactly the opposite, to protect the children from abuse, know when it's happening, when they should inform the teachers, the parents about it, but no, those bans are saying overtly that basically LGBT lobby is forcing sex education in schools in order to rape children. And they keep moving with those bans in the largest Polish cities, and they're not really there are few ways to limit it. Some towns like Poznan or Krakow have found ways to block it, but for example in Warsaw you can still find those bans running. And it is the same foundation that has promoted the bill to ban the Pride marchers. So theoretically an anti-abortion foundation is like one of the main motors of the homophobic campaign, and it is only in order to polarize people further, to antagonize the society against LGBT people, show that we are the bad ones, we are the ones who like are a threat, and trying to justify that we are a threat because the Polish children have to be protected from us, which is nonsense. But people buy it, people believe it. And for example, also two quotations. There's a funny quote. They try to tell us that they are people, but this is just an ideology. This is the actual quote from our president from his presidential campaign. And there's another quote, those people are not equal to normal people. And this is a quote from the man who is now the Minister of Education in Poland. So he's in charge of the schools and whole education system. So you can see like which people are in charge of education in Poland and of Poland in general.
Yeah, it must be. Sorry. it must be really painful to hear those words from the people that are supposed to represent you and your country. And just I saw a lot of good questions were asked in the chat. I think we could pursue on those questions. The first one is Leo. If you want to ask your question out loud, if you're still here.
Yes, so thank you very much for your two interventions. First, I wanted to say that you're not alone, because we are European people, and that we really have to fight together regarding that struggle, not only in Poland, but also in France, Germany. And I just had one question by curiosity. In France, there are associations that are religious, that are both religious and LGBTI, pro-LGBTI rights. Does it exist in Poland, or is it too risky in the Catholic community, for example, to do those types of association?
So there is an association, Wiara I Tęcza, Faith and Rainbow, that regroups LGBT Catholics in Poland. They organize religious services in different towns, but they are not recognized by any form of church authority. So the church distances itself from Faith and Rainbow, but such religious services are available. There was, for example, one church called the Reformed Catholic Church that was established in Poland, and they started allowing same-sex marriages and blessings, but after that they were delegalized by the Ministry of Justice.
Thank you very much.
Maybe if Ania, you want to answer as well as the question, or maybe everything was said.
This is what I know as well. I don't know much, but this Wiara I Tęcza is known to me as well.
Okay, well, our next question is coming from Simon, if you want to ask it.
Do you know if there is something that we can do as French activists to help either Polish LGBTQI plus association or Polish LGBTQI plus individuals?
Yes, actually, I even can connect this answer with what I wanted to say as well, because like we were very pessimistic in this conversation. So I see some good things going on, and maybe we don't see the world in this colorful in these colors now, but I see many grassroots organizations and activists in Poland, all over Poland, even, or maybe especially in these LGBT-free zones, which are called LGBT-free zones. They are not like officially called like that, but we say that because they announce themselves as LGBT-free ideology regions. So that's the difference. But even in these areas, for example, there is a popular now activist who is called Bart Staszewski, and he's from Lublin, which is my hometown. And I admire his actions because he organized the first Pride Parade in my hometown 2 years or maybe 3 years ago now. He fight in courts. He sues some discrimination behaviors to courts. Like he's done so much during this past years. And what I admire as well is that he and his let's say team, they are going to some small cities, or not even cities, villages, with a LGBT stand to talk to people, to give them rainbow gadgets, and like to approach them in their natural surroundings. So it's just the beginning of the conversation. But of course, there is the risk that you go in there and someone can attack you, for example. And he, as an individual, he's active also in social media, so you can follow what he's doing. Maybe I'm gonna also add to chat some of the things that I can share with you that you can check later in the internet, because probably he's posting in English sometimes as well. But he's known personally now, and that's why he's attacked like almost each day, or maybe each day, I don't know. He shares some of the messages that he's receiving for his job as an activist in Poland, and they are very like terrible messages that I like, swear words and like threats, like real life threats sent to his personal social media, for example, platforms. So him and also some organizations which also do a lot, like Miłość nie wyklucza, which means love does not exclude, or Kampania przeciw homophobia, which is campaign against homophobia. There's a Stonewall Poznań, which is Grupa Stonewall, so group Stonewall. So this is an organization from city of Poznań, and they are active in social media, but not just in social media. They're educating, they create workshops for teachers, for children, or many other things like that. And also they have an English account, the new English account, as I've seen some time ago. So what I would advise is to follow social media of these organizations, and to share the news, to understand at least what's going on, and to speak about it. Because as you can see, like we can hear in the news that something like Poland is homophobic, but it doesn't mean that the whole Polish society is as well. And we do things here in Poland, and we do have our personal lives here, and we want to show you that we want to create changes, and it would be easier if you know more about us here, and to follow what's going on. So I'm gonna share it, and yeah, you can participate in our parades or some of the events or educational programs and international exchanges. Like this one is just an amazing example of what you can do, and you can like now share in the social media of what we are talking here. So it's like, I think it's an amazing job that you do.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I think just to say the same thing as you were just saying, the fact that we talk about this matter, and we show people that we're concerned about what's happening for the LGBTI community in France, but also in Europe and in Poland. The fact that we talk about it around us, to our friends and family, and on social media is already a way to act and to help you guys back in Poland. Margarita, maybe if you want to ask the last question.
Yeah. I'm sorry. It would have been like a perfect way just to conclude our meeting on this positive point. But well, I'm still going to ask my question because it makes me curious. So I wanted to know if there are some important or well-known fact-checking media outlets in Poland, because that would be able to counter the action of misinformation and fake news and so on.
So for specifically fact-checking media outlets in Poland, there is one, an independent news website called Okopres, but it's presented in Polish, not in English. They actually are composed most of queer people, queer journalists who are volunteers. It's an all volunteer media outlet, and what they do is actually verifying what the government's saying, checking facts, saying what is the actual, for example, legal situation, or what actually happened instead of what the government said it happened. And also for other bigger media, it is important to notice that not all of the media in Poland are controlled by the government yet. There are like private televisions, private newspapers who create some diversity of journalist service. So you are not like left alone with the government narrative. But for the specific fact checking, Okopress is the right choice to follow.
Okay, thank you very much. It was really, really interesting.
Yes, I would add what I said before and what Michal said in the chat comment in a second. So yeah, I would recommend Okopress as well. And I have to think now about any other source that it is in English. So give me a second, I will write down in the chat. But especially the social media platforms, I would say. And there's a Facebook page, Notes from Poland, which explains what's going on in Poland in English, so you can see that. So probably there are some articles about this matter as well.
Thank you very much. Anyways, we'll put all the links in the event and on our Facebook and Twitter pages, so for you to be able to find them again. Thank you very much to you both for having joined us in this conference. Thank you to Terry that she's already left, but thank you for her presence and for her time. That is precious. And we're looking forward to do other conferences on this topic with the CAELIF. I'm just going to add that we are also working on a booklet for that will be available in French in the springtime. So on LGBT rights in Europe. Keep posted on our social media, and thank you again for your insights and for being here with us. And have a great evening to you all, and see you very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.